In this AutoCAD video, I would like to talk about the basics of using layers. Layers are very useful and can certainly get more complicated than I'm going to cover, but here's the gist of it. So layers are really set up to make your experience in CAD easier, although setting them up can take a little while. When you start using CAD, you come in on layer 0, okay? So everything that I've drawn right here in terms of the walls, the chairs, and everything are in one single layer. If I activate all of that and right click and go to the properties palette, I can see that all of this stuff will be on the exact same layer. So right here it says layer 0. It's all white, and that's color right here in the square by layer, which means that the color is determined by the layer. Okay. If I want to perhaps easily change the colors, if I want to lock things so I can't manipulate them or damage them, I might want to start putting things on layers. So I'm going to do that by clicking up here in the upper left-hand corner of the Layers panel on the Layer Properties Manager. When I get in there, you'll see I have a couple that I've played around with and set up, but really you might just have 0. 0 is also my active layer, and I can see that with this green check mark. To make a brand new layer to work with, you just click this little button right here, and it will make a new one and call it layer 1, then 2, 3, 4, and so on. So I might call this maybe walls 2 or something like that. These buttons here deal with how the layer is visualized, basically, if it's on and off, if it's frozen, if it's locked. But then here we get into a few different things about it. So color, for example, it's going to default at white, but you could come in and change the color in a variety of ways. The index color are the most basic colors of CAD, and it would be related to the pen table and how you plot. The colors here are going to be up to you. There are some, industry standards for certain things, but really, at this point, you can just pick colors that make sense to you or that are going to work for what you're doing. If you're working on the standard black or dark gray background, obviously I would stick in this lighter color palette, but keep in mind when you go to plot, those are going to be hard to see. If you're working on the white background, you might, stick with these darker colors and so on. You can pick them here. We can pick them in the true color, which has a much more Photoshop type feel in terms of how their color picker works. So you can come in and pick by hue, then the brightness and the saturation over here. And then you can also pick color books where you find, Pantone color and, all that type of thing. So you really have a lot of options. So I could just go to index color, pick one, and say OK. Beyond simply changing the color for a layer, notice that there are many other variations that you can make. For example, under line type, you can go in and change between a continuous line to hidden to phantom or whatever you might be using by clicking in here. And we can change the line weight from the default thickness to something thinner or thicker. And so on with transparency and all those things. The important thing to keep in mind is that this will be global across the layer unless you choose to override it. So everything on this layer would have those properties. We also have, very importantly over here, the plot section with the little plotter symbol. If I click on that, you'll see that you get a smaller plotter with the classic red no icon, and that will mean that this entire layer will not plot. That's very important. If you ever end up in a situation where everything's going fine except something's not printing, that very well may be why. So once we have a new layer created, I can just close this out and we can start moving things around. Like I said before, everything is actually on layer 0 at this point. So if I want to change that, I can come in, highlight something, then come up to the layers panel and simply change it to that layer. I can hit escape, and now you'll see that this chair is blue and this one's still white. I have the properties palette open here on the side. So if I click on this chair and even just part of it, you'll see that this is on layer 0 here. and it shows me the line type, the scale, the weight, everything about it, and that the color is by layer. I'm just going to hit escape, and now if I click on this chair, you'll see up at the top it changed to walls 2, and then in the properties manager here, the properties palette rather, it says layer, walls 2, and then the color is by layer, and now it's blue, and so on. If you want to change things, you can do it up here or in the properties manager. For example, with this highlighted, I could come in and change it from walls 2 to a different layer. And now you see, because this chair wasn't joined together, the top half is on one layer and the bottom half is on another. If I select all of these elements here that are on 2 separate layers, the layers panel goes blank above because it can't name any one specific layer that these objects are on, rather. And over here in layers it says varies. Okay, so then I could go in and say, oh, I want to put that on walls 2, even though that doesn't make sense because it's a chair, but that's fine. Okay, so that's how you change from one layer to another. So I could pick this one and put it on this chairs layer. I could pick my walls and change that to my walls layer. And notice that when I picked the hatching and changed the layer, this hatching changed as well to a new color. Okay. Once you have items on different layers, you'll see that you can use those to your advantage. So if I come up to the top, if I turn the walls off, they simply just disappear. They don't go away permanently. It's just that I can't see them anymore. So you can use that if you have a very complicated drawing and it's really bogging your computer down. You can turn them off and back on again. You can also lock layers, and when you do that, they kind of gray out a little bit so that you can still see them, but you can't damage them or move them. If I wanted to draw, I could use my line tool, turn on object snap, for example, and if I wanted to draw, I would be able to snap to those lines, so I can still use them to my advantage, but I, for example, cannot click on them and hit delete. Okay, I can't erase them, and that's really nice. So a locked layer is still visible, although grayed out, and you can use it to, base measurements on and all that kind of thing, but I can't damage it. A frozen layer is particularly useful when you're doing 3D, and so it's not something you're going to use a whole lot in the two-dimensional world. So I'm not going to talk about that too much right now, but really when you're doing two-dimensional drafting, you can either turn the layers on and off, or you can lock them, and that's really useful. So as you're working and you're creating the larger elements and working your way in, you might start locking the walls and floors and ceilings or whatever it might be, just to make your life a little easier so you don't accidentally delete things and all of that. If I want to start drawing in a layer, if I wanted to start drawing lines on any given layer, I can simply come up here and just change it to a different layer. Oops. If you click on the actual color, it will open that color dialog just like that. That's not what I meant to do. I just click on the word. I can actually start drawing in that layer now, okay? Because you will draw in whatever layer is active up here. And that's something you need to pay attention to. You can also use these layers in terms of your printing. So as we've looked at, we have this piece of paper here with these viewport boxes on them. These boxes came in on layer 0 because that's the active layer I had at the time, which means that they would print, right? Well, maybe I want to lay this out but not actually have them print. This will come up in the last video with the DWG to PDF. So what I would do here ahead of time is possibly make a new layer, call it something like, no plot or print or whatever, and I might change it to a color that's different just for my own ease in working, and then change those to that no plot layer. Okay, then what I'll do is go back into that manager, and at some point before I print, just make sure that this is toggled to the no plot setting. So anything that I want to print, or not print rather, I can just put on this layer and I don't have to worry about it. But once again, if things aren't showing up and you expect them to, always double check that. So when you start getting into more complicated drawings, don't be afraid to use layers to make the process a little bit easier. And then you can simply lock aspects of your drawing that you don't want to damage or manipulate by accident. And then you can also, have a more interesting looking drawing that's maybe easier to read because of the color variation.